Well, how about that jam to get the evening started? Thank you to one and all for coming on in to Beyond BMR, the show where anything goes. We talk about everything down all these rabbit holes. It don't matter. Cryptids, the paranormal, UFOs, aliens, we provide it. Tonight, Jody Cook, North American Dogman Project, coming on in to join us. Can be a fantastic show. Thank you so much. Joining me in Studio B, the lovely KRISTA Michael Tweedy from the Blondes and the Booze Paranormal Podcast, found on YouTube. Please subscribe if not already. If this is your first time here, please subscribe to Bigfoot Mission Rob on YouTube. Like, share, turn on the alert bell. Thank you right off the bat for the super chat from T-Bone. The super chat is a great way to help support what we all do around here. Super chats are donations that are not expected, but always appreciated. Thank you, T-Bone, for starting off the evening. You can find us on iHeartRadio, Spreaker, wherever podcasts are found. If you want to help support what we do, again, the super chat's open. And also you today, you can become a BMR pirate. Arr! Join up. You get a picture of me by your name in the chat room. Yeah, a cool thing I do for you guys. About 140 of you have subbed or joined. Thank you so much for that. You can check us out on YouTube. All of our pages across the board, and you can find out about all our events and other things that we do have going on. And moving right into what we have going on as a group. On Mondays is Texas Front Porch. Texas on from 8 o'clock to 11 on Monday. Tuesdays, right back here, Beyond BMR with the lovely KRISTA, 9 o'clock in the East. Wednesdays, Barton Nunnally in Humanoids, 9 o'clock in the East. Thursdays, Brunch with Bigfoot Michigan Rob, 1 o'clock in the East with my buddy Tex. Thursdays, our Paranormal World with Monica Rollins on Texas Front Porch. I think that's on at 11. But Thursdays at 9 in the East, for sure, I know this time. It's the Blondes, it's the Booze, it's the Paranormal Podcast. Check them out Thursdays at 9. And you know what? If you need more woo with the Booze, they come back on a Friday at 8 o'clock in the East. Check them out and subscribe. Sundays, Truth or Tinfoil, a separate channel on YouTube. That's Brandy and Randy. And what they do is they break down videos and pictures. It's kind of a fun show where they just, hey, is it truth? Is it tinfoil? It's very much geared toward the audience to offer their opinions. They do that. Check them out. And if you like true crime, Texas Front Porch, Infamous Minds, you can find them also on Sundays at 7 o'clock in the East. And one last bit of news. I don't have to promote the Alabama Bigfoot Conference anymore. Yay. It was a great turnout. We'll talk briefly about that in a moment in the beginning of the show. I want to thank everybody for buying my book, Bigfoot Mr. Rob Presents True Cryptid Encounters, Book 1, found on Amazon. Book 2 is coming out end of July. If you bought the book already, I do appreciate it. When Amazon comes calling, please leave a review. It does help the analytics. It does help promote sales of the book. So thank you ever so much for that. Yeah, let me get rid of this. Let me get rid of my book real quick. Okay, that's done. I'm going to bring up the lovely Brandy. Oh my God, KRISTA, I'm sorry. I spent 4 days with KRISTA and Brandy, and I always mix them up. I love them both equally, as she well knows. I know it's kind of annoying, but I do it. And sometimes I call Brandy KRISTA. Here we go. Here's the lovely KRISTA.
Hey.
Hi, KRISTA.
How are you?
I'm doing pretty well. I'm well rested after, the Alabama Bigfoot Conference, which I think was a great success. I think, I loved it because every single person I met, and I'm not kidding, for all you listening out there in Chatland, I knew all of you from subscribing to us. I did. I put the face with the YouTube handle, and I was taken aback by the support we got and the love we got from the people. It was fantastic. Mm-hmm. And when I say this, I think I can speak for the group. We love and appreciate all of our subscribers.
For sure.
Subscribe to the Lons and the Booze, Texas Front Porch, and of course BMR.
Yeah, it was great. It was really, really great meeting everybody and meeting them face to face and yeah, it was
It
awesome.
was a great time. I love doing those just because you get to meet with the people that give to us, and I'm glad we could give back a little bit. And if you were in attendance, we do appreciate your love and support. And
Yep.
so thank you
Yep.
ever so much.
You know what we need to do? We need to figure out who came from the furthest distance
Yeah, I
to the conference, because there were some people that put in some miles now. Let me tell you.
and that's the thing that overwhelms me the most. For people that told me, Rob, I drove 10, 12, 15 hours in some
Mhm.
instances to meet you guys. And when people tell me that, Krista, it just my heart flutters, and I'm very humbled by that. Very
Me too.
humbled.
Absolutely.
Um,
Absolutely.
and next
Yeah.
year, I know next year a little. I'm just giving this out just to let you get a little teaser. Our group, which consists of myself, Brandy, Krista, Tex, we're doing something next year, which is going to be big, very big. And that's all I'm going to say, Krista, because we got something big planned for, I think, perhaps in the fall. I'm not sure. Don't quote me, but we got plans in the works for all you fabulous people. And yeah, that's coming. So keep
It's coming fall 2025.
2025. Be on the alert.
Yeah.
This will be bigger, better, and better because you guys deserve it. And thanks for the turnout.
Yep, absolutely. It was a great time, and it
I
was
had a
great
great time.
meeting everybody. And Be Kind. So she's been in chats from day one, and she was there. It was so great to meet her. And Fisher of Spam. I've talked to him on Bart's show. He's been on Bart's show, and it was cool to actually sit and talk to him. And there's so many others, that I've met Catherine Gay before, but she was there. Just so many. I mean.
Yeah, there's so many people. And Liberty, thank you for the awesome super chat to start the show, along with the awesome T-Bone. Again,
and what was really cool too, I don't mean to interrupt you, but
go.
People who were coming up and said, hey, we're big subscribers of Inhumanoids with Bart Nunley, and hey, we're paratroopers. I can't tell you how many paratroopers came up, and talked to us, and it was just awesome, man. It went to show, because there was other podcasters there, and it was like a fellowship. It really was, because everybody was just there to support each other. And everyone, awesome.
Yeah, there was Inhumanoids, there was paratroopers, there were booze fans, porch fans, BMR fans, and that was great. And and really quickly, Spilling Tea says, she says, if I don't know what's going on, you got to give me a little bit more so I can make sure I can come down, something like that. BMR, if I don't know what's coming up, I won't be motivated, safe to go. Well, you better be motivated, because you got, right here, 2 people up front, right? Yeah. And a bunch of us, Barton, and so again, going back to anyone of these fans, paratroopers, it was a great turnout. And I have to single out a couple people really quickly. I don't know if Fisher of Spam's in the chat room, but I know the lovely Be Kind.
Spam is in there too.
Thank you, Fisher. Well, there's 2 people, and again, I love you all. You're all great. Well, I gotta tell you, we just, as you know, Chris, I was at your house Thursday night. We hung out. We went and had a little bite to eat. Then we got up at 4 in the morning, drove all the way 8, 9, 10 hours, whatever it was, to Alabama.
Long time.
I pull into Alabama. It was quite a distance to travel. And Be Kind was already there. There's about already 12 or 15 people in the lobby.
Absolutely.
And we just pulled up, and I said, man, I forgot my dang contact solution in the case. And Be Kind, I was just talking out loud, and Be Kind was there, talked to her, hugged her, and had heard. And 20 minutes later, she calls me, hey, Rob, I bought you your stuff. I didn't want you to have to run out to Walmart. I know you've been driving.
Right.
That's the type of people. First of all, Be Kind's lovely, beautiful woman. I love Be Kind to death. But that's the type of people that follow us, right? And thank you. And Fisher of Spam, such a great guy. Offered by lunch for everybody. And Fish of Spam was nothing what I thought he was going to be from his chat name. That's a great thing. I thought Fish of Spam would be some, old crotchety old guy. He's a young
guy.
He was a young little stud with beautiful flowing hair.
Yeah.
So it was a pleasure to meet him as well. And and again, this is two people off the top of my head. We got a show to run here. But those of you that I met that are here in the chat room, I love you genuinely. And so does KRISTA and the rest of our group.
Absolutely. Yep. And it was great meeting other podcasters that I had never met that I do subscribe to. There was a bunch there that, I was subscribed to already. So
absolutely
them as well.
Absolutely, Chris. And I think we're going to kick this off. If you're new here, please subscribe to BMR, The Blondes, and Tex. With that being said, we got a great guest.
My favorite subject. Woohoo.
My favorite subject as well. And it's a guy that's been on maybe his third or fourth time and gracing our audience. It's Jody Cook. Here we go.
Yep. Hey.
How you doing?
Hi, Jody.
Great.
Hey.
Yeah, we get long-winded in the beginning, Jody, but, we had a lot of people to thank, and we had a great time in Alabama, and I want to thank you for taking time out of your busy day for joining us this evening.
Not a problem. Appreciate it.
I
always love to come on.
Yeah, I appreciate you. You're a fan favorite. You're a friend of mine. We talk, and I learn a lot from you just by following your page and seeing you on other shows. And you're a person, and nobody's an expert in this field, but you provide great information. And there's always new people that come into the chat room. There's always new subscribers. And despite the fact that you are kind of well known, if you'd like to just give a brief rundown of how you got started in this crazy business.
Oh, well, I've always been in, to the cryptids ever since I was a kid. I think it really started when I saw the Legend of Boggy Creek as a kid, and we had woods that was over by my house. I would go in there and just, look for Bigfoot, and it's just something I was always interested into. Now back in, the 80s and 90s, they weren't, well, let me go back to about the 80s. They weren't a whole lot of groups out there that did cryptid stuff. A lot of the stuff was UFO stuff. But I did a lot of UFO investigation, and we had a television show that we did that was on public access TV. Okay. It was before cable, and it was a live show we did every first Wednesday of the month. And we talked about different things, had guests, and then we were getting a lot of Bigfoot reports coming in with the UFO stuff. So myself and George Clapperson decided to take the Bigfoot stuff. And kind of from there, it kind of ran off, for quite a few years, and started to get into the Dogman stuff because the Bigfoot field is getting really political, and so I kind of I didn't want to deal with a lot of the stuff that was there. Got into the Dogman stuff, and been there ever since.
That's a great way to sum it up, in that you've been doing this for quite a while, and this is going to sound like an easy question, but I find the most difficult question, because we can only answer this question based off our experiences and our own thought process, our own theory, I guess you could call it. What the hell is Dogman, in your opinion?
Well, basically, I believe that it's a couple of different things. Okay. Yeah. It's definitely flesh and blood. It's something that has always probably been here. It's just, there was just so much in low numbers that no one really seen them. Then there's probably a supernatural aspect to it also. And I think that's more of the bigger part of the Dogman phenomenon is it's more supernatural than it is actually flesh and blood. So it's one of these things that, even Linda Goffrey, even had trouble believing what a Dogman could be. And she finally came up with a answer is it's just some type of Canaan that was able to walk on two legs, where it was, different than most canines, with the front paw being more like a hand, but it was still able to do everything a regular canine can do, but it had the ability to walk.
Right.
So, you know, it's just one of these $1 million questions that, you know, you just don't know what it is. There's so many different variations of it. It's mind boggling.
You know, there are a lot of variations, and we'll get into some of those as the show goes on. You know, Butch Witkowski. I know you're familiar with Butch. He's passed away for several years. And he was one of the first guys that when I listened to, I think he was on Space Out Radio as a regular once a month. And I always found Butch fascinating, Jody, because when he talked about Dogman, he talked about an upright canine. Talked about the when it stands on two legs with the hocked legs, an oversized dog with a wolf, a German Shepherd oversized head, and could walk, you know. And then you talk to other people that see it as a werewolf looking creature that, you know, walks with legs like human beings, and they have the girth. They're 7 foot tall, and they're massive. They're muscular, which again we can get into that. But I think in the beginning, when I was first getting into this entire subject back in 2018, I was kind of thinking that Butch's first belief, and I think his most solid belief, was just an upright canid, flesh and blood creature. What's your thoughts on Butch, the late Butch's theory?
Well, I agree with him. It's definitely some type of upright canid, okay? But you can't ignore the supernatural aspects of a lot of sightings and encounters of Dogman. So is there two different realms of the Dogman? Me personally, I deep down inside, I would definitely have to say this is more of a flesh and blood animal that was just in so much low numbers 100 years, 200 years ago that they weren't ever seen as much. And now the numbers are growing bigger and bigger. So we're getting more and more sightings. You know, when I did a lot of Bigfoot research back in the 80s, you know, I was getting reports of, you know, a Bigfoot with a snout, Bigfoot that had legs like a dog, a Bigfoot, you know, that had high pointed ears. And at the time, you know, 80s and, you know, 90s, there weren't a whole lot of Dogman stuff going on. You know, you didn't even hear about it. You heard about some stuff in the Michigan Dogman, Beast of Bray Road, and the Defiance, Ohio case. That was like basically it. But when I go back and look at these reports from the 80s, these were Dogmen, what people were seeing. It wasn't Bigfoot. It was a Dogman.
Mm-hmm.
What's your thoughts? You hear the story of the Michigan Dogman, which of course where I lived, that was in Wexford County back in, I think, in 1983. And they made the radio station came out with that jingle. And I think Linda Gottfried was involved or did some research on this. Was that the first true sighting in North America in 83? Or are there sightings that were prior to the Michigan quote unquote Dogman?
Oh, there are sightings going all the way back into the 1800s.
Right.
Of the Michigan Dogman. Yeah. See, a lot of the Michigan Dogman stuff were never really documented. And if they were documented, they were documented in newspapers and just by stories going down generations. That's what a lot of the sightings were. I have a complete list. I don't have it in front of me, but I have a complete list of all the sightings going all the way back to the 1800s that were in newspapers that took place of the Michigan Dogman. It wasn't until probably late 90s is when it was getting really, really popular. A lot more sightings were taking place going into the 2000s. The Gable film was another one that kind of gave it a lot of popularity. You know, a lot of people have a lot of issues with that film. The thing that I believe is that part of the Gable film is where this thing is coming down off the hill. I believe that is a legitimate video. And this individual that was on Monster Quest a few years ago.
Mm-hmm.
He said he mocked it up. He couldn't even reenact that whole incident. And I think they try to hoax it up, to make it look more legitimate. But I truly believe that one part of the video is actual evidence.
Which video is that? I don't know that I've seen that.
It's a Gable film where this guy's supposedly he's out into the woods and he's got a camera, and there's this dogman on a hill and it comes down. But what's so unique about it is the way this animal moves, and you see how the arms and the legs move.
Gotcha.
It's a human could not do that. But when you get to the end of the film, you see where it comes and bites on the camera. And
what is the film? I'm gonna look that up.
The Gable film?
Oh, the Gable film. I've heard of that.
I think that's how it's pronounced.
Yeah, it's that Gable film. Is that the one where the guys where they're on the road? Oh, the Gable film.
Gable film, yeah.
Hey, do you remember that video that was showed? And we've all seen it ad nauseum about the dogman in the field that was on all fours and starts running at these people coming down the interstate, and it gets closer and closer, and then all of a sudden the video goes stagnant, kind of like that one, the Blair Witch Project. And yeah. I kind of thought that was fake. And then Lynn Gottfried got a hold of the people that put out that video,
mm-hmm.
and then they went ahead and spoke with her. And they said that they didn't say whether or not it was fake or real. And Linda got the opinion that she was unclear. She thought parts might have been the truth and parts were fabricated. And the thing that I have to ask is, I think it's a setback for people like us when people make this stuff up. It's so hard sometimes to disseminate truth from actual reality.
Well, the problem what we're going to be dealing with now is, AI.
Yeah.
Some of that stuff is just so real. It's just going to literally destroy
mm-hmm.
the field.
Yep. Already has, I think.
Yeah.
That's with everything, because people post a video or even pictures, and it looks so lifelike, so real. But, everybody says, oh, it's fake, it's AI, it's too good. But then when it's blurry and not enough, then it's,
Well, and see, that's the problem. Someone's going to get a really good video or a really good picture, and it's going to get downplayed because it's going to say it's AI.
Correct. I agree.
So, yeah. I mean, what are you going to do?
Yeah, I don't think there's anything you can do because AI has already infiltrated YouTube, has infiltrated Facebook, whatever social media platform you're on. And I was saying this several years ago, and KRISTA knows this, and KRISTA kind of is in my department. She and I and Tex and a bunch of us, we get, much like you do, Jody, I'm sure, all these pictures, these photos. There's so many, there's so many to look through. And here's my thing. Here's my opinion with the pictures today, now with AI, the evolution of AI. My biggest evidence or the biggest things that I love listening to is the actual audio.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
I think that's harder to fabricate than a picture per se.
Mm-hmm.
What's your thoughts on the audio?
Well, we had one of our audios that was taken and altered a little bit, and where these individuals were allegedly on an army base, and there was a dog man there, and they got the audio, but we found out, it was actually our audio that they altered. But the thing of it is, it was pretty legitimate video. There's a real military base, real guys and so forth, but I don't know if they did it to be funny or someone was out there playing the audio. But it was definitely our audio, but it was definitely altered a little bit. So
wow.
Yeah, because we have one audio on our website that's just, it's very distinct. audio, and it's one of the best because the state of Ohio, the DNR has a data bank of every single animal that's in Ohio, a sound, and they couldn't even match up to anything they had, and they requested a copy of it for themselves for their files.
Wow.
So yeah, it's pretty unique.
Yeah.
And we got it in an area where there was actually a sighting like 3 days prior to that.
Wow.
Yeah, daytime sighting, in an open area by an airport. So yeah.
That's pretty, I was going to say that's pretty brazen on the Dogman part. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, what was so unique about the sighting is there's an airport and there's like a fence that separates this condominium area and the road that goes into like several different condominiums. And there's a fence there because it's the end of the airport. It's a small airport. It's Lunken. It's the one like the Beatles flew in. Obama flew into it a couple times. When the presidents come to Ohio or Cincinnati, that's where they fly in at that one there. And there was a couple that was walking their dog, and it was daytime, and the fence kind of came like this, but the holes in the fence were like so small, but you were able to see through it. But when it kind of went together, it's like a black wall. And as they were coming around, they saw the back of it, and they described this thing being it was sitting down about 5 feet. And they knew it was a dog because they saw the high pointed ears and the tail. And their dog just started to go, crazy. He wanted to leave. He was yiping and everything. And that's when it turned around and they saw it. And, it kind of turned around, looked at them, stood up, and, they went ahead and took off and, ended up calling the police. They wouldn't, because they were heading back to their house, and they had to have somebody come and get them in the car to take them back. So we set up on a hill, which was like right there where the sighting took place. And what was weird, there were all these shoes that were buried in the ground going up this hill. And that was like the weirdest thing. There were shoes buried. And so we set up on the hill there, and I think we were on our probably third night, and that's when we got the sound. And it's a pretty decent sound.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So it's on the website if anybody wants to go listen to it. It's under the evidence page.
And I've actually dropped the chat or your website link. It's under BMR. So I'll drop it again right now if anybody wants to go over there or has an encounter or whatever.
Jody, all information out about an encounter. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And what's that website, KRISTA? If you can read it out loud.
It's in there. It's NorthAmericanDogmanProject.com. Very
good. And Jody, of course, you're the founder of a section, I guess, of the NADP. And what's the ground you cover?
Well, I'm the founder, the owner of the organization.
Yes.
So, top guy, I guess.
Yeah.
You're the CEO.
I'm the CEO, I guess. Yeah, that's the best way to put it. Yeah.
Oh, very good. Well, yeah. NADP, Jody. So all the NADP Facebook groups, pages, that's all under your umbrella.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well,
awesome.
The regional directors and the state reps run the pages.
Yeah.
So I pretty well give them. I allow them to use their own judgment on how they do things. So
yeah, sure. Absolutely. Give them the autonomy and such to do their thing, which is probably better for you because I know you're a busy guy and you can't be monitoring everything.
I got the website that has to be updated, and there's just a lot. Yeah.
Sure.
Why don't you walk us back? Because everybody likes a couple good stories, of course, and we tell our stories on this show. And I say story.
Can we answer a real quick question? Because he had just talked about the last story that he had said. Fisher of Spam said, did they give a description of what the Dogman looked like? Real quick?
Okay, cool.
Yeah, I believe there's a in the evidence page. I think there's a drawing of it that they did, but they described it as German Shepherd, wolf, very large head, very large body. The front paws were very much like hands. The tail was shorter than a typical like German Shepherd tail. So I don't know if it was partially damaged or anything, but it was like a really, really light black color is the way they described it.
Wow.
And it was apparently eating something, probably roadkill or something along the fence line there. So.
Wow. Really briefly, we're to get out of this interview. I got to give a quick shout out. I don't know if she's watching right now. My sister-in-law, which I call my sister, I've known her since like I was 14. She's in Las Vegas with my brother, and she contracted COVID in Las Vegas.
Oh,
so she's probably watching. She won't go in the chat room. She's watching. So Karen, as I call her, if you're watching, I love you. Get better. Hopefully up and running by Thursday. And shout out to Karen. Love you, sis. And get better down there in Nevada. So quick shout out for Karen.
Go all the way to Vegas to get COVID. Boy, that
they're great poker players. They're playing the World Series of Poker. My brother and Karen are fantastic poker players. They've been doing it for like over 20 years. They're very good. They look forward to this event. They spent like 3 weeks down there. So she's got time to recover, recoup. My brother will take care of her and such and so on and so forth. So shout out to her. Get better, speedy recovery. And I got to walk this back, Jody, to your first, when you got first started in this, what was your first, because I don't know if I recall your first experience in the field with Dogman.
My first sighting?
Sighting, whatever your first inclination about there's some roaming canid in North America.
The very first thing I was with the Defiance, Ohio case, and the London, Ohio case that took place, which are both very interesting cases. The Defiance, Ohio case took place in 1972, for about a span of 3, maybe 4 days, where they describe a werewolf was harassing the town. The first encounter, it attacked 3 men at a railroad depot. And the police got to the point where the people were so scared they had to sit there and do something to calm the people down. So they would say that it was wearing clothing, maybe so it would possibly somebody in a mask, which they knew that wasn't what it was. They knew it was definitely some type of animal because it was killing cows, it was killing livestock, and Ohio did not have any bears until 1980. Now today we have bear in 44 out of the 88 counties. So back in 1972, there were no bears. The biggest predator in Ohio were coyotes. And whatever this thing was, it was killing multiple stock animals. So, and from there on, it kind of just died out. And then you had the London, Ohio case, which was a sighting where, now this was kind of unusual because this one was more like your Lon Chaney style type of werewolf, where they believe this individual was actually turning into a werewolf, which was kind of interesting case, but it was just one of these things that there's more to it that's not being told, but it's being told a certain way to keep away from the truth is the best way to describe that whole incident there. So that was like my very first going into the Dogman stuff. Now, I had a sighting of one in Daniel Boone National Forest in Kentucky. And there's a town next to there called Moorhead, Kentucky, which is kind of a very wicked little town because there's all kinds of weird stuff. UFO sightings, missing people, abductions, just a whole lot of crazy stuff. And we did a Bigfoot investigation there, and how the park is, there's like 3 different levels that, trails. So I was on the middle trail with a group of people, and we came, around a bend, and we saw eye shine. So it was a deer that we saw there. And so we're looking at the deer, but when you go down the road, there's grass on each side and there's bushes. But at one point, this bush like came out to the road. Okay. And it was probably about 4, maybe 5 feet. And that's where the deer was. And when the deer saw us, the deer kind of like did this jump, kind of like go over the bush. But at that same time, this creature grabbed the deer. And you saw the arm grab the body, you saw the snout, the high pointed ears, and it just ran off of the deer, and then you hear the deer screech. Daniel Boone National Forest is well known for a lot of Dogman sightings in that park. A lot. There's Bigfoot sightings and stuff that take place in there, but not as much as the Dogman stuff. There's just constant amount of Dogman sightings that's going on in that park. It's just so unreal. And that was my Dogman sighting. I had another incident that happened a few years ago where, like where I live, like I told you, it's about 100 yards from the river. Mm-hmm. So they built this park along the river, and it's a really nice section of the park. But where the woods are, they end up doing this huge trail, like a mile trail going into the woods. And a lot of people like to go walk into the woods there. So this couple was walking in the woods, and they had a dog with them, and a deer just ran right in front of them. That's neat. And this large, what they described as a werewolf from like the Van Helsing movie, went right at the deer and chased the deer. And it just, they're talking that this thing was just feet in front of them. If they were walking a little bit faster, this thing would have boloed right into them. And so how I found about that case was kind of interesting, because at about 30 yards, 40 yards from my house, there's a fountain that's been there since the 1930s. Okay. And it has an Indian on top of the fountain of the chief of the tribe that lived in the area where our neighborhood is. But on the fountain, there's werewolf heads going on each side, which is really odd, And like you said, this fountain's been there since the 30s. Mm-hmm. And I talked to the Historical Society, and I said, can you give me some information about, the fountain? Because why does it have they're not wolves, because it's more of a human face, with a snout and high pointed ears. And, she was saying, I don't know much about it. It's been here since 1930s. And it's like, why do you think it's a werewolf? And I told her what I did. She goes, I got to tell you this. Yesterday, one of my friends saw one in the park there at Fairbanks Park. So I ended up, talking to them. They took me over to where the sighting took place. I found some prints, made casts. But what was so weird about this whole incident is strange things started happening. I had my dog just passed, but I had 155-pound German Shepherd male, mm-hmm. and he wasn't afraid of anything. And for like 4 days, he would not leave the yard.
Wow.
Would not leave the yard. He constantly looked out the bay window. And I couldn't get him out of the yard to go for a walk. He wouldn't go into the backyard unless I was there with him. So there was something that really, really frightened him. So one morning, I actually got him out to go on the sidewalk, and we're walking down, and there's the street kind of bows a little bit, and there's this huge tree that sits in front of this house. Okay. And there's something under this tree, and it's just sitting there. And this car goes by, and you see because this is about 5 o'clock in the morning, and you see the tail lights like go to break, and then he like speds off, which was like really weird because whatever that person saw scared him, and he took off. So my dog wouldn't go any further. So I ended up coming back, got him inside, and he would just stare out the bay window. So I was tired, so I went back to lay down. He just was going ape crap, literally going ape crap. So I walked into the living room. I'm looking out. I'm pulling him out, so he doesn't bust through the window. I look outside. I don't see anything. All right, it's still a little bit dark. So I was getting ready to go to a VA appointment, and I go by my car, and there's this handprint on my car. Like it's a paw print. You see the paw marks, and I have a picture of it. And something urinated on the hood of my car.
Wow.
And it literally, I mean, you could see it, you could smell it, and it literally ate the paint off my car.
Wow.
A day or two later. Yeah. So, but what was really weird that morning, my wife told me that on her way to work, that there was a bunch of black SUVs that were blocking the entrances to the parks that morning. And where I live, I'm really close to the Indiana border, and I've been here, 20 years. We had the house, and I probably saw a Cincinnati police officer 5 times, and that was when there was an accident on the street. That 4-day span, there was just a lot of police activity, not just from the city, but from the 2 townships next to us, going up on Route 50, going up, up on our street and stuff, over at the park along with the park ranger. So it was just one of these things that was just, it was really weird.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is weird.
In the beginning of the show, you talked about the Dogman being more flesh and blood and such, and I get that. And again, we all have our opinions. I think there's both avenues, and I also think they're ethereal. I think they can go through portals. I think they can come. They're a dimensional in a lot of these cases. But then you mentioned Lon Chaney. Now, my favorite movie growing up as a kid was The Wolfman with Lon Chaney Jr., right? We've all seen it. So let me ask you this. When it comes to shape-shifting, I know there's a lot of folklore about werewolves. We've all heard the stories. I think folklore starts somewhere, and I think all folklore starts with some semblance of truth and fact,
right,
dating way back. But when it comes to a human being shape-shifting into a werewolf, what's your thoughts on that?
Well, the thing is, one organism transforming into another organism. Okay, your bone structure would have to be cartilage. It would really destroy your organs. Okay, now another theory is that they're able to change their image of their face, by making the eyes see what they want the eyes to see, what they want the brain to see, things like that. And actually, there's some really weird cases that's actually taking place right now where these videos are popping up where these people, just their faces are so disformed and distorted on video cameras. And so how is it getting picked up? So that's a possibility on this. Can something like that happen? I'm sure it could, because we've had a lot of different reports come in where Dogmen have been wearing like human clothing, like a shirt or something to that effect. Okay. We've had a lot of sightings just in northern Kentucky in a residential area that has a park. This girl was, on a run one morning, and she sees this werewolf standing at the end of the wood line wearing a white shirt, a button-up white shirt. And, she knew it wasn't a costume because the way she described this entity it was very canine looking. She said it looked like a dog standing up with a human shirt on. I mean, it was that realistic. And she drew a picture of it. We have a picture of it. And even Bart Nutley's mother, her sighting, the Dogman was wearing a shirt. So are they mimicking people in order to thinking that they're fooling someone where they're able to get your trust because they're trusting and mimicking a human? That's a possibility.
Yeah.
You think a lot of these things in the woods, I don't care if we're talking Dogman, Bigfoot, Mothman, Frogman, Toadman. Do you think, though, with the supernatural element and you're out in the woods, do you think that I think that a lot of the paranormal and a lot of the energy that's in the woods, I think they know our intentions going in. Let's say you're a researcher, or let's just say you're a camper that has interest in the cryptid. Do you think they pick up on that and they can project what we perceive to be a Dogman or a Bigfoot because they know in our mind that's what we want to find? So you think that it's some sort, let's say the Fae, right? The Fae are very notorious, from what I understand, about conveying messages that are false to convince you into thinking something else. What's your thought on that?
Yeah, I agree with that. There's a really big possibility. We had one report come in where a woman was walking in the woods by her house, like she's done for years, never seen anything, never had any issues or anything like that. And she ran into one, and it was talking to her, telepathy. And it was telling her, I'm not what you see. I'm not what you think I am. I'm different from what you are seeing me as, which was kind of really weird because it was just one of these things like, it's not me. You don't see me the way you see me. I'm different, and it basically told her just to go away. I'm not going to hurt you. Just leave. Yeah. We've had quite a few reports like that. So are they trying to convince you that what they are is not what they are? Or are they able to alter your mind to making you believe they are what they are or they're not what they are?
Yeah.
That comes into the supernatural part. But the thing of it is, a lot of researchers don't want to touch that. They wanted to strictly do the flesh and blood. The North American Dogman Project, we look at everything, even the extraterrestrial part of Dogman. We look at. You have to have an open mind because they're all connected one way or another.
Absolutely.
You need one, in order to find the truth about the other.
Absolutely. Yeah. There's somebody asked a good question here, and I have a question for you. I was thinking of it, and then I seen they had asked it. Let me find it here real quick. This one. Brian says, Jody, do you think the Dogman is being tracked or controlled by the government? Do you think Sasquatch is?
We got this really good report, which is I find it to be highly, highly believable. This couple, it was an older couple. I don't think they had any reason to make this up. But what was so interesting is that they're driving home from a trip. Okay, they got lost, so they went ahead and turned up a road, to try to get back on to the highway, thinking that this is, this road's going to do it. So they're going up the road, and then they start to see the lights in the distance. So it's like, okay, good. We can get directions. So when they get up there, they see all these military vehicles, and then they see all these military individuals. The weirdest thing they saw were all these dog-headed men wearing U.S. military uniforms with the U.S. flag on the shoulder.
Wow.
And they said they were dogs. And when the one human soldier saw them, he told them to go after the car. And they came after them, and they were able to turn around and go and get, it was able to get out there. But they said for the longest time, these things followed them.
Right.
So is the military using them? Of course. I think
I believe so too.
Here's an interesting, okay. If they find something, if they can militarize it or weaponize it, they're going to do it. Mm-hmm. A lot of people don't realize this. You all know the story about The Exorcist, the real Exorcist story. Well, the whole bedroom set of that original boy's bed and his dresser, everything, the clothes that's in the dresser, everything is sitting at Scott Air Force Base. Mm-hmm. Why does the United States Air Force have possession, of that bedroom set? To weaponize it, to find a way to weaponize whatever evil is there embedded in that furniture, that bed. They're going to weaponize it.
Yep.
If you can have something so dark and so evil and be able to put that on troops at night, to put the fear in them, you're going to hold that ground. You're going to take that ground. Okay. And if you have something like a Dogman, and you're able to sit there and put that animal out to do your killing for you, so you'll be able to move troops into another area because they're very quiet, they're stealthy, they're strong, and they can, they put the fear, in a human being. And why not do it if you can weaponize it?
I'm going to ask you a question about the weaponization of these cryptids. But before I do that really quickly, as part of the show, I'd like to thank the folks that have dropped the YouTube a chat. T-Bone, thanks for the super chat. Keith, the super chat. Liberty for the super chat. Thank you so much. It would help support what we do. I appreciate that. And of course, you can become a BMR pirate as well. Get a picture of myself, the bandana by yourself. Thanks for the super chats. Not expected at all, but appreciated with your donations. And for you moderators out there, if you're newer, Chris and I can't drop links for Jody. We can't drop links for the Blondes, BMR, and text. If you know how to do it, please do so, because we just can't do everything during a show because I'm listening to Jody and listening to what he has to say. So I really can't do that. And thanks for everybody for coming in today. So moving on, Jody. And by the way, we'll take questions, put them in caps. Krista's been starring them, and we'll get to them a little bit later.
There's a bunch of questions already.
Yeah, and we will take those in about a half hour or so. But Jody, moving back to the weaponization, if you will, of cryptids, in this case, we're talking about Dogman. Do you think that our government has created these things in laboratories? We all heard about the DUMBs, deep underground military bases, and we know things go on. I think that our government has captured a Bigfoot. I think they've captured a Dogman. I think they've captured everything, and they keep it hush hush. I think they've experimented on them, and I think that they've probably tried to create some sort of killing machine. Now, for war, I don't know, but you know how it is. Evil runs amok in the United States and the world. Yeah. So is it your opinion, you think that these things have been created, a lot have been released into our national parks and forests, that may have be a factor, one of the factors, there's many, in the missing 411?
No, I don't. I don't think that Dogman is a lab created animal. Okay. Right. I believe there's something that's always been here, but I can see the government collecting them And it's kind of like the island in Dr. Monroe, where, you know, you put the chip in the head and you're able to control them. Okay. It's one of those things that there's something they're able to put in the body where they can control it and utilize it at the same time if they need it. It's a possibility. You know, I'm sure there's a facility somewhere that has a Bigfoot in it, or a Dogman, or something to that effect. You know, a different cryptid. They're, you know, some type of government zoo where they're studying them. You know, finding out what their threat level is, you know, to humanity. And, you know, we have to look at, you know, all these different cryptids. Okay. What is the possibility that they're from like an inner earth environment? Okay. Now, remember, they just recently found all this water, you know, way down below the Earth's crust where water shouldn't be. You know, and the possibility of, you know, a whole different type of environment down there. And these cryptids are basically from there. You know, really interesting case when Katrina hit. Okay. Now, I just got out of the military at the time when Katrina hit, but I still had a lot of friends that were in the military. I had a lot of friends that I served in Iraq with that ended up going to private contract companies that were in Katrina. And one of them told me that the reason why the government took all the guns away from the people wasn't to violate their constitutional right or to stop someone from being killed, is that when New Orleans flooded, all these, I'm trying to think of the right word for it, reptilian type people came up from out of the ground. And God forbid someone shot one and it ended up on the news. So they said that's why they confiscated all the weapons from people. So they were out on patrol. And this is a friend of mine told me they were out on patrol one night and they came across a group of them. But they were able to make them just literally freeze, their body freeze. They were able to see what was going on. And they basically froze them until they were able to move out of the way, you know, to keep them from being harmed. And they said, yeah, these reptilians were coming out of the ground because they got flooded out. And it's just, you know, so the possibility, you know, that, you know, Bigfoot, Dogman, Mothman, Loveland Frogman, you know, these creatures could be living from a whole different environment in the inner earth theory.
Yeah.
So let me ask you, that's a great point. I know, KRISTA, you got something to say? Go ahead. I can wait.
I was just going to say, you know, he mentioned about, you know, these creatures being in like maybe underground bases and stuff. You know, some people believe even like at the LBL that there's underground bases and, you know, things like that. And, you know, who knows?
Yeah, who does know? And Jody, really quick, do you believe in the inner earth theory? I got to tell you what, nothing surprises me in this world. And I think that things come from the inner earth. We talked about Kentucky. The entire state of Kentucky, for people that don't know, and it's public information, there's many underground tunnels, caves, cavern systems where all these things can come from. And now we're talking about inner earth coming from beneath the crust, perhaps, or within the crust. I think a lot of these things are there. You know, we talk about how they can disappear in a whim. If you take out the woo, you take out the portal, you take out the dimensions, they know where these habitats are, where they can disappear in an instance, right? So do you think that the inner earth is something that's a relative subject?
Yeah, you know, we talked with a guy that back in the 1950s, I think it was like 56, he said he was with the Army Corps of Engineers. Okay. And the biggest fear at that time was nuclear war. And if we can get people underground to save the population, could we do this? So the Army Corps of Engineers ended up doing these expeditions, going through all these different caves to see how far they went down. You know, could people survive in there? How could they store food, water, things like that? So at one point, he said they were down there literally underground for a month. And they end up finding these caverns that were almost like cities. They were abandoned. No one was there, but it was just, you know, just carved out. You know, you had buildings, you had like storage facilities, just, you know, wells, things like that. It was just really weird the way he described it. It's like another, you know, civilization lived there. And then they found these bodies, very large creatures that were still preserved because they were buried in sulfur. So it preserved and mummified them. And he described a lot of them being like a gorilla, and some that were very human, but they were huge, you know. So they were able to recover the bodies. But he said that, you know, this was something that was very, very strange. It was something they were not allowed to talk about. They were constantly debriefed. Their phones were tapped. I mean, you know, just crazy stuff. So no one knew about it. And he's at the point, because, you know, I don't care anymore. You know, they can kill me if they want to kill me. But he described all this stuff to us, which was just so interesting. So the possibility of civilizations is very, very big, I think. I mean, you look at the stuff that's going on in Antarctica, you know, with the underground facilities and stuff there that they're finding. You know, when Buzz Aldrin was there, you know, he had a heart attack, but he sat there and talked about, you know, some of the strange structures that they found there that wasn't, you know, made by us. Someone else did it.
We would talk about Antarctica, and we talk about the underground basis for UFOs. I don't know how much you're into ufology or follow that at all.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think there's any connection between the ufology or UFOs and these other cryptids? Because you all heard the same stories. You've heard them, Jody.
Yeah.
Bigfoot appeared, a UFO appeared, Orgs appeared, a Bigfoot did. Dogman.
Here's my theory behind that. Okay?
Yeah, let's talk about it.
I do not think that, you know, Bigfoot, Dogman, Mothman, all this other stuff are aliens. Okay. I don't think they're alien pets. I don't think that, you know, they come from a planet that they were criminals and they were dropped off. I don't believe any of that. I believe the UFO encrypted connection is that when humans get abducted, they get abducted also. Okay. Because if they're finding humans and then they're finding some of these other cryptids, they're going to study them just as much as, you know, when they find a cow or a horse and they study that when they abduct those things. We had a woman call into our show that we interviewed when we was doing the Bigfoot research, who was our UFO research, who was abducted, and she talked about a Bigfoot laying on the table next to her that was being examined. So I think that's the connection. That connection makes sense because, like you said, I just don't see, you know, a alien race of Bigfoot, you know, or anything like that. Now, when it comes to the Dogman, that's a little bit different because we received a lot of extraterrestrial type reports where they were dog-headed, okay, from people in the military. So that is a, you know, a possibility. You know, look at Star Wars. You know, the original Star Wars was what, 1979, I think, had two werewolves in the bar. Okay.
Yes. Right. Yeah.
I contacted Rick Baker, who made those costumes, and I asked him, Okay, were those just additional, mass just to fill up the space? No, these were specifically made for that. So where do they get this? Why do they have a werewolf Jedi? Why do they have a werewolf type creature wearing a spacesuit? Okay, when you're doing Star Wars, a show like that back in 1979, who's going to believe a dog, being an alien? They had to get it from somewhere.
Yeah.
Okay? So, so there's a possibility that there is an extraterrestrial part. Now, Linda Godfrey and I both had the same story a year apart from two different people that talked about an alien species of canine that were recovered from a craft that crashed on Earth, where they were survivors, and that these were so violent and so warlike, they couldn't keep them in the United States. They had to keep them in a foreign country, in a military base in a foreign country. And they actually got out, and I was talking with a guy who was part of a special unit in the government that recovers UFOs. And they had to respond to take out these canine type of aliens. So, did George Lucas get that information, from, someone from NASA? Because this crash of these canines was like in early 70s. So did they get information? Lucas is a Mason, and at that time, you have to understand, all of NASA, anybody who was anybody in NASA was a Mason. So George Lucas was able to see things that people with high clearance at NASA was not able to see. Okay, and there's a really good book called Dark Mission by Richard Hoagland that talks about all this stuff through NASA, with NASA hiding, and it has kind of a connection with Star Wars. And there's a picture in the book, which is really interesting, where on one of the Apollo missions, they found a crash site on the moon, and there was part of a robot, and they took a picture of the head, and it's in color, and it looks like CP3O's head. I'm not kidding you. So if you Google robot's head, Dark Mission, and go to image on Google, you'll see it. I mean, I'm not kidding. It's CP3O's head, but it's got red lips, Wow. And they talk about the Millennium Falcon ship was in a crater, and that's where they got that design for the ship. So there's kind of like a lot of weird stuff, but Richard Hoagland goes through all this stuff of all this alien connection, to like with Star Wars and things like that, what kind of makes really, really a lot of sense.
I mean, we're kind of on the same subject, but I got to ask you this now, because I've always thought about this. We've talked about George Lucas, me and KRISTA have, and I got to tell you, let's talk in general here about some of these movies. They're mostly like the Star Wars type, or even the movie Alien. I must say, I think a lot of these writers, these directors, these producers, executives in Hollywood, forget about Hollywood being Hollyweird and all the other evil that, probably lays in Hollywood. I think they got these ideas from either having experience with perhaps a extraterrestrial, and I mean that sincerely, or somebody that's had an out-of-body experience with something. Because I will tell you this, I think a lot of these movies, although movies are fiction, unless it's a documentary based on a true story, a lot of these ideas that they come up with, we talk about on a monthly basis on these shows as not fact. Nothing's a fact. It's all hearsay and speculation. But a lot of these ideas, Jody, they come from somewhere, don't they?
They do.
I mean,
you look at the X-Files. Look at some of the stuff that was on the X-Files that's happening today. Look at the Simpsons. the stuff that happened on The Simpsons.
Yeah.
And look what's happening today. So somebody knows something that's telling people, what's going on. It's really strange. It's amazing. But somebody knows more. I saw this interview for the CEO of Boeing, and this was when he was the CEO of Boeing when Ronald Reagan was president. So that kind of tells you, this is back in the 80s. And he stated in the interview, he goes, whatever you see on Star Wars and Star Trek today, it exists.
Wow.
We made it, we make it happen. So in that, somebody knows something.
Interesting.
Somebody does. And Chris, I got to let the dog out right quick. I'll leave with Jody for a minute. I'll be back in about 2 minutes.
Yeah. And that's the thing too, like just like urban legends, they stem from some truth.
Right.
And same with the movies. When you said that, like about Star Wars, it's like Jabba the Hutt, that big guy. Can you imagine those things walking around?
You have to sit there and wonder, what is it, why the government thinks that we can't handle the truth?
Right.
Okay. I used to believe that if the president of the United States got on TV and said, look, extraterrestrials exist. Okay. We have recovered spacecraft. We have the pilots. Thus far, they have not become any threat to us. If they do, we will do what's necessary to handle, to save the planet. Well, you'll get kind of mad because they knew all along and they didn't say anything. But at the same time, you're going to go to bed that night. You're going to think about it. You're going to get up the next morning. You're going to have breakfast with your kids. You're going to go ahead and get your kids to school. You got something to talk about at work. You're still going to take your kid to the soccer game. You're still going to, go to the movie. I mean, life's going to go on because deep in the back of your mind, you already knew it existed. So it's not that big of a shock to you. Okay. And that's how I always felt how we could handle it. Then COVID came along.
Yeah.
Okay. Now you saw how people acted because you didn't wear a mask.
Right.
Okay. Or you were standing too close. So, and now I can understand why the government doesn't tell you
everything,
because, people cannot handle it. A large majority of the population could, but all it takes, in a crowd of 100 people, one person to lose it.
Right. Absolutely.
Okay? And that's all it takes. And that's the problem. But like I said, it was just one of these things. I always felt that we could handle it, but it's it can't. And I can understand there are certain things that the American people doesn't need to know. Okay. And there's certain things that the American people do need to know, regardless how harmful it is to tell us.
I don't know. I think we as Americans, like, especially like these national forests and stuff, I think we have a right to know what's out there. Because, people, as we all know, the 411 and all of that kind of stuff. Like,
okay. Now think about what you just said there. You have the right to know about cryptids. Okay. The problem with that is, okay, humans cannot coexist with other animals. We can't even coexist with each other.
True.
Okay. So if we don't understand it, we kill it. Okay. I used this theory one time on the show. Okay. It's a hypothetical situation. Okay. So let's say mermaids exist.
Right.
Okay. And they're spawning and living where they get all the crabs and lobsters. Okay. World government says you can't go into that area anymore to go fishing for your crab and all that stuff, because that's where they live. We have to protect them. Okay, then people lose money, people lose their livelihood, they lose their house, they lose everything. Okay.
Yeah.
What do you think is going to happen? They're going to put their life and their family's welfare ahead first. They're going to go out there and they're going to kill them. Mm-hmm. Okay. And that's the whole thing. Okay.
I guess my thinking is, these families that don't know about or don't even say believe in like Bigfoot or anything like that. They go out to these forests and they go camping, and they let their kids ride their bike down this path, and because it's safe, and in all actuality it's not.
I agree. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's just people, they can't handle reality too much.
You're right. I agree with
you. And that's what it comes to.
Yeah. I think, like you said, that C word, when it came out, boy, that was just, everybody was panicking, and, they kept track of like, oh, there's, the deaths here in this town. And it was just one big, yeah.
Mm-hmm. It was just a mess. You got to put fair controls.
Yeah.
And the thing of it is, you have to be that sheepdog.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. I got to ask you something too about all this. And I want your thoughts on the LBL, Land Between the Legs. I have to tell you, and I will say this. I was driving with KRISTA back home from Alabama, and we took a detour and we went through the Land Between the Legs. Now we did a drive-through. Now we weren't dressed appropriately to get out. I had no hiking boots. I was wearing slides.
I was. You weren't.
Well, KRISTA was. I wasn't. And she goes, "Hey, Rob, let's take a detour through the LBL." I'm like, "Well, yes, let's do it. It's not really out of our way driving home."
Mm-hmm.
We go through it, Jody, and I will tell you, we were driving through. Then she goes, "You want to stop and get out, and walk around?" I'm like, "Hell yeah!" And I got to tell you, driving through, and I've been through a lot of state parks around Michigan and other states, and which are, they are what they are. They're what they are.
Mm-hmm.
But I got to tell you, and I'm not making this up, not at all. Driving through, I'm looking, and we saw these roads that they say the roads end in nowhere, and
that's what I call roads to nowhere.
That's what KRISTA likes to say, because there's a multitude of them. There's no state police around. They're around, mind you, but they just don't. They're not apparent. They don't make themselves noticeable if they are around. So we stop, and we at one of the multitude of cemeteries of all places, because of course KRISTA is a paranormal person, and well, I am too now. Finally, we get out. We're walking around in the cemetery, and I start walking down some paths, and I got my phone out, and I snapped a bunch of pictures, took some small 1-minute videos, and I got to tell you, something overtook me that felt really creepy, and I'm not making this up. It just felt odd and just different. It felt like a different world to me. And now, if you investigate further in, you find a lot of abandoned houses back from the 1900s, when the people were kicked out by the government. They were given an option: here's X amount of dollars. If not, we're taking over your property, and you got to go. And there's all sorts of buildings and houses throughout there. But I got to tell you, man, I got a creepy vibe going through there, and I have a pretty good intuition and sense of things. I've had that throughout my life. I got to tell you, I found it very strange and odd. I wasn't scared by any stretch of the imagination. I wish I had some boots on, because it was kind of muddy. It was kind of rainy. And it was a sunny day, but the way the trees kind of covered everything, it was like 10 degrees. It was like cold. It was like 85 degrees, but it was cold in there. And I felt strange. And I got to ask you if you've ever been through the LBL, and if you had been,
mm-hmm.
What have some of your experiences been? Did you find it to be like something different, like everyone claims to be?
Yeah, I mean, it's a heavy feeling. It to me, it's the same type of feeling going to like Point Pleasant, West Virginia.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, if you ever been there, I mean, you feel it as soon as you get into Point Pleasant.
Okay.
It's just so heavy on you. LBL has always been the same way. And, I never really had that type of feeling, not even in Daniel Boone or any other place that I've been to. Those are the only two places that you have a little bit of fright in you, when you're there, because there's so much energy from something in that park. Yeah, it's very wicked.
And then, of course, Chris said to tell me, you realize, Rob, we're walking on dead bodies because there's like dispersed body, because, they had grave sites back in the day where they buried their dead. There was a bunch of headstones and some. And I go, thank you, Krista, one for that.
Yeah,
sorry, I felt like, sorry, Jesus, but and for the people that were deceased and buried there, but I got a weird feeling about that place, man.
Yeah, there's a lot of family members that's buried out there on family property.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that really don't have headstones and stuff. So
right.
the energy there is weird. But when talking about cemeteries, here's a couple cases that all coincide together, which is really weird.
Yeah, please.
We had 3 different reports from 3 different parts of the country where people have seen these dog-headed beings in cemeteries wearing cloaks, wearing a gray cloak.
Okay.
Which is kind of weird. And like I said, in a span of 3 or 5 years, we've had 3 different reports coming in from different cemeteries. And, I'm wondering, what could that be? And then if you do, Dogman research, you do research on other different type of canid cryptids and stuff, then you look at the hellhound. Okay, the hellhound job was to protect the souls from being taken by the demons.
Yeah.
Okay, in a cemetery. Could these entities be the hellhound protecting the souls? Because what was so weird about each of these cases, they were all the same. They were wearing, they would see the dog head, wearing the cloak, and then when they got noticed, they put the cloak over their head.
Mm-hmm.
So it was things protecting the souls. Were these the real, hellhounds?
Right.
But interesting case, by far. Like you said, those are my 3 favorite cases of all. Are those right there?
There's one of the cemeteries at the LBL. Supposedly, legend has it that a dogman was seen coming up out of a grave.
Mm-hmm. I've heard that. Yeah.
You heard that one?
Yeah.
And I got to tell you, I've been to that cemetery, and it's I've dealt with the paranormal for a long time. I've watched, partaken and helped in some exorcisms, and demons are there. They're out there. However, I feel they're very few and far between. And, there's a lot of nasty ghosts that can be bad, but they're not demonic. However, at that particular cemetery, it's definitely, I'm 99% positive that there's a demonic entity at that cemetery.
There's something about that area. I mean, I can't see the government moving everybody out just to make a national park.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah. Right.
It doesn't make any sense.
Right.
And then they build all these bunkers.
Yeah.
Some of them don't even have doors or windows.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Which is weird. And a lot of people don't understand. Fort Campbell's not that far from there, and 101st. They do exercise. Military does exercise there all the time. Mm-hmm. So when people talk about, well, we saw military down, because they're doing their exercises there, and that was part of the reason why, I think they took that land and kept it as a national park, but yet where the military can train in a bigger area. but there's something that was there that they had to take all those people out. It doesn't make any sense. And there's so many different places in the United States where communities were just, the people were uprooted and everything's still left there. I mean, Ohio even has a town called, they call it Helltown, where all the houses are still standing. Everything's still in the houses, the businesses, everything. Where do people go?
Right.
Speaking of Ohio, I know you. I don't know if you want me to say where you live, but I know it's in Ohio somewhere. What's your thoughts on the we've all heard this, the Ohio Howl? Is that supposed to be what is that? Dogman, Bigfoot? What's up with that?
It's Bigfoot. It's more Bigfoot related. Yeah, the Ohio Howl. Yeah, it's something that's always been Bigfoot related. When I did, it's like the name Grassman, and I'm on it. I'm being 100% honest with you. I was the first researcher in the state of Ohio to ever use the name Grassman. I was the first one to use it on TV. I was the first one to use it in a book. Okay. And I got the name when we did an investigation up in the Cleveland area, that the people in this community, they called it the Grassman.
Yeah.
And I did a lot of research on the name. Okay. And Northern Ohio has a lot of Dutch. Okay. And the Dutch came from South Africa. They didn't come from Holland. They came from South Africa. Okay. So Grassman basically came from Bushman. Okay. Now there's a book called The Buckeye Boyhood by William Vanderbilt. And he wrote the book in 1899, and it didn't get printed till like 1911. Okay.
Wow.
But he talks about, there's a section called In the Woods, and he talks about a Bigfoot in Ohio. And he describes it between a gorilla and Sinbad's Old Man of the Mountain that would harass people between the town of Cincinnati and Utica. And they called it the Bojesman.
Interesting.
Okay. So Bojesman means Bushman, and it came from Africa. Now you had Bushman Wiki, which is the human Bushman. The Bojesman is what they consider the Bigfoot. And in South Africa, there's an area called Giant Castle Pass, and it actually has cave drawings on it of the Bigfoots there compared to human, which is really interesting. And they talk about the Bigfoot and the Giant Castle Pass in South Africa being cannibals. Okay. Mm-hmm. So when in the 1800s in Ohio, when they were seeing a Bigfoot, that's why they were calling it the Bojesman, because that's what they called it in South Africa. Now, as generation goes on and goes on, it got changed from Bojesman to Grassman, which basically means the same thing. So I did a lot of research on that name, and to this day, everybody uses the Ohio Grassman for the name. But yeah, I was actually the very first one to ever use that name, and I remember people laughing at me for using the name Grassman. Or, oh yeah, Grassman, but it was just in the community, that's what the people called it. Not because it had high grass or anything like that. It's just the name changed through generation when, the English dialect changed through generation.
Wow. Yeah. Crazy.
Yeah.
What's your thoughts on the Dogman hanging out cemeteries? Is that just a fable, or are they found in cemeteries, or it really doesn't matter? They're all over the forest, I imagine.
You broke up there. Repeat that. I
get a lot of stories and reports from people, and even watched on other shows where dogmen are found a lot around these cemeteries. We were walking through the LBL, and the LBL, we were driving through. My Lord, Jody, there was 4 or 5 cemetery names that they're throughout.
Right.
We all know about the LBL's reputation. Do you find that dogmen are apparent more so in cemeteries, or that's just coincidence?
No, I mean, you get a lot of Bigfoot sightings in cemeteries. We have one here that was actually taken in Cincinnati, where William Henry, the president, is he's buried at. And if you go up this hill, these concrete steps, there's a cemetery up there, and like the last person that was buried there was right at this Civil War. And one of our team members was going up there. It was a fall day, was going to just take pictures of the cemetery. That's all they were doing. And they saw Bigfoot digging in the ground, snapped the picture, and just like left. And I mean, the picture's really good. You can see this, you can see the arm digging, you can see the head, you can see the ear, you can see the features of the face, and this massive arm digging in the grave or digging in the ground. I don't know if it was a grave or not, but when we went back up there, you can see the hole where it was digging, and it had this like root that was still there. But I think they mimic humans. They could be, because they see us burying our dead.
Right.
Do they bury their dead? Very interesting video that came out of Ohio and Akron of a dog man digging a grave up. Okay, which is really awesome video. And when I did the investigation up there, I talked to the people at the cemetery, and they said, when that incident happened, the police came and confiscated the video. But they said this isn't the first time this thing has done it. It has done it to a lot of different graves. And they said it's a werewolf. Now, if you look at the video, I mean, I've got close-up stills of the creature in black and white and color. You can see the high pointed ears, and you can see the massive hand with the claws where it was digging this grave up. And within, 6 hours, they had the grave filled back up again. So, yeah. And I think those pictures are on our website. And I know I believe that it's on our front page, and I think the video's on there also.
I've got a question that a lot of people that I'm kind of, I have different opinions. KRISTA has different opinions. If we go back to ancient Egypt, there's the depictions on the walls, the scrollings, and of course, hell, even on their gods they worshipped, we've got
Anubis, yeah.
Anubis. Now, with Anubis, any correlation to today's modern dog man? Do you think, and again, I know you're more of a flesh and blood guy, but you think that through a portal or through a different realm or reality that exists here today somehow, that was transported back in time to our century?
I interviewed a Canadian soldier that was in Afghanistan, and his team was in Kandahar. Okay. And they were in a defensive position. They were dug in, and there was this like wall that kind of ran around this building. And they said all of a sudden these kids were running, coming around the end. They were running, screaming, and a pack of dogs were chasing the kids. So they were getting ready to open up on the dogs, and they didn't, because the dogs were getting too close to the children. And it got to the point the dogs end up passing the children. So they're like, okay, it's the insurgents, they're coming. So what they end up doing was popping smoke right around the corner there. And they said this massive, about 12 feet tall, dog-headed being just comes right through the smoke. Black, as night, but it was wearing like a pharaoh's type garment around its waist. But they said it looked like Anubis. They said that's the only way we can describe this thing. It was Anubis. They opened up on it, didn't even hurt it, didn't do anything. It just stood there and just went back around the wall. So, was that Anubis coming back,
Right.
or was that some type of supernatural entity? Was it an extraterrestrial entity? We don't know. But these guys, they were very serious on what they saw.
Yeah.
And the way, like you said, the way they described it was, it was Anubis, because that's all they can think of what it was.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
KRISTA, you got a bunch of questions. Do you want to pull out some of the questions for Jody from a lot of our people in chat? If you want to go through
a bunch of questions.
All right, we'll get into that.
So, Audacious Amber says, what do you make of the human part of it? Do you think it's natural or genetically modified from a time before?
Well, it's an interesting question, but here's something that's kind of neat, is that when they have DNA tested of Bigfoot hair, it has human DNA in it along with some type of primate DNA.
Mm-hmm.
We have had hair samples, canine hair samples tested that came back of an unknown species of canine, but also had human DNA.
Mm-hmm.
So where is this human DNA coming from in Bigfoot and Dogman hair?
Right.
Is it some type of genetics that took place, through the Anunnaki or something like that?
Right.
Where they had huge human DNA for some of these other cryptids. That's why you get the similarities in the bodies and so forth. It could be.
Right. Okay, next question. Truthy Ruthie asked, hey, Jody, talk about the Butter Street
Monster. Yeah. Germantown, Ohio. Yeah. Germantown, Ohio is farmland, dairy and cows. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
It's a flat land. So Germantown, when Germantown was starting to get more populated and they're building suburbs, Butter Street was the very first one that they did. And when they went pretty far into the woods, okay, and they did houses on both sides. It was just like one street that went in and you had a little turn and you came back out. Well, the people in the 70s, when this was being built, was seeing this creature what they described as a werewolf, and they called it the Butter Street Monster. And everybody knew about this thing. It never really harmed anybody. Yeah, it killed livestock. It did take pets and so forth. It did harass people at night, but it never took human life or threatened to take human life. But it was definitely described as a werewolf. But now they call it the Germantown werewolf.
Okay.
So the people who are like my age knew it as a Butter Street Monster because of the stuff they grew up with. And we have quite a few interviews from people that have actually seen this thing. And we have a howl that's on our website from Germantown that when the media was out there talking about the werewolf and the wolves and things like that, they picked up a really good howl. And we don't have wolves in Ohio. So yeah, especially back in the 70s, it's a really good howl. But yeah, that was the Butter Street Monster.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
T-Bone asked, what does Jody think about the smoking dogman at Skinwalker?
Smoking dogman at Skinwalker.
I'm not familiar with it either. Okay.
I'm not familiar with that. We did some investigations outside of Skinwalker Ranch because those guys are dweebs. They won't let anybody in there,
Right.
Yeah. So, but what's really interesting, there's a lot more sightings and information that takes outside of Skinwalker Ranch, and we've got some really good pictures of a dog man that was in someone's backyard. And yeah, it's a really good picture because this thing's mouth's open. You can see the tongue and everything where it's panting. And but yeah, I'm not real familiar with that one, to be honest with you.
Okay. Truthy Ruthie asks, Jody, have you ever investigated Rush Run area in Preble County, Ohio?
No, I have not, but I know what she's talking about. I know they've had some sightings up there, but no, I have not had a chance to get up there. I've been wanting to get up there. We have one that actually came into our website, but we had a couple people from up there that contacted us through our Facebook pages about some of the sightings that's taking place up there. So no, I haven't had a chance to, and I want to this summer. You know, I'm going to get a lot more time where I can get out there and do a lot more traveling.
Gotcha. All right, next question. Brian asks, Jody, have there been any new reports of the Germantown? I think he meant monster here.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, we're getting a lot more information. We had one of a really good sighting from a law enforcement officer up there that actually seen one actually come out of a cornfield. They had two sightings within like the last year in that same spot. So we know there's like real heavy activity taking place on one particular area. Now, I can't think of the name of the road. Anthony Road. There's a lot of sightings that's been taking place on there. We had a DNR guy that reached out to me and was telling me when he was out there locking the fence up one night, he saw one, and he never believed it. He heard about it, but until he saw it that night. So yeah, a lot of activity still going on out there.
Wow. All right, next question. I won't put it up. I'm just going to read it because I just put the Flat Rock thing up. Audacious Amber asks, what do you think of surviving cave hyenas?
You know, that's a really, really interesting theory. One of our researchers, Kenny Tredone, has been doing a lot of research on that. I don't think that it's an actual dogman. I think it's a whole different species.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now, what was so interesting about the hyena one is that we had a deathbed confession. I don't know if you guys heard about that, and I'm not sure if we have it on our website, but we had a deathbed confession from a guy that worked for the state of Kentucky that was at LBL, and he saw one kill two people.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he literally saw it. But he described it as more of a hyena. I mean, it was standing up. It was very large, but more of a hyena than an actual wolf. So,
is that the one that he was out on the water?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. He was in his boat.
So, Rob, I took you there yesterday to where that happened.
Yeah, you did. You certainly did.
Where the area is, you know, what's so weird about where the incident happened, you can literally see they just dug up for about 3 feet up where they took, you know, all the soil from the shoreline, which was really weird. And they have a big pile of rocks, so you can't even get up the road to where that incident happened because they blocked it off.
All right, next question. Let's see. This is when you go back talking about your encounter. Spill and Tea asked, after the black SUVs left, was your dog back to normal?
After the incident where whatever it was touched my car, my dog, went back to normal because they have not been any sightings or anything over in that park. Now, what was really weird, okay, is that I think it was 2 or 3 days later, there was a report from, I was talking with their DNR guy, and they said they shot a wolf in our neighborhood.
Wow.
So I don't know,
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know what it was when he said they shot a wolf.
Yeah.
But after then, like I said, everything kind of pretty well died down.
Speaking about shooting a wolf, you ever heard the Joe Barger story in Michigan where he allegedly killed a shot and killed a dog man in Michigan? He's a truck driver.
I actually listened to that story today.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. So, I don't know the guy. That's the same one where I guess the government came after him they said was an asset or something.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, like I said, I actually today was the first time I ever heard that story.
Okay. Well, I'm not going to let you dig into that. I don't want to put you on the spot with that, but I will ask you this though: do you think we've shot and killed Dogman and Bigfoot? Do you think that's been done by the government or other? I find I'm not going to talk Joe Barger's encounter. I'm not talking about that's set aside. I'm not talking about him at all.
No.
But do you think, though, I got this feeling that now, of course, his story was in a truck, but if you're in the woods, Jody, and let's say you shoot a Bigfoot, which alleged a lot of people have, I don't think you're going to get out of the forest alive, my friend, because where there's one Bigfoot, they travel, in my opinion, with their family, with their group, their tribe. If you shoot and kill one, the other ones will tear you apart. That's my opinion. What do you think?
Well, when people say they shoot one or shot one, they may have hit it and it went down and they're thinking that it's dead. And there's a possibility they missed it and it went down, to make you believe it was dead.
Certainly.
I think they know what a weapon is, a gun, and they know what the gun can do. Because, again, they see us hunt, so they know it could cause some damage. But I believe people have shot one and killed one.
Mm-hmm.
I do believe the possibility of it. Definitely. And they probably buried it, and didn't, because they knew if it's an endangered species, they're going to jail. So they covered it up. I mean, I truly believe, people have actually killed these things. And maybe they've gone back to go to recover the body, and the body's not there because the body was dug up.
Yeah. There's one last final question here. D Truth asks, do you think Bear Man can be a Bigfoot Dogman hybrid?
I don't know much about Bear Man, except for the stories that comes out in Russia. I mean, because Bear Man is more popular in Russia than it is here in the United States. Mm-hmm. Now, the Russians believe that it is a canine bear mixture of the animal, but they believe that this is something that has always been there. At one point in time, the two species became one. How, I don't know. But I've talked to Russian researchers that have reached out to me about Dogman, that what they're dealing with in their country. And we talked about, the hybrid, bear dog and things. And that's what they believe. It's just, it's a different cryptid, but it's just something of both of them together, because there's canine in both bear characteristics in these. But like I said, I've never heard about a case here in Ohio, or not Ohio, but the United States.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. Well, that was it of the questions. I'm at the end of them that I started.
I think Audacious Amber just dropped a quick one. about, do you think that there's do you think
Oh, gotcha.
a hybrid Dogman program? Is that what, did we just cover that? I don't know. I just lost the question. But anyway, Jody, do you think there is a hybrid Dogman program, I guess? And we talked about it earlier
Breeding
about
program. Breeding program. Yeah.
Was it a breeding program?
I'm
Okay,
sure,
breeding.
I'm sure there is. I mean, the government always, like I said, if they can weaponize it, they're going to weaponize it. And, of course, you're going to have breeding because the offsprings are going to be the easiest thing to train and to weaponize over a full grown one because you can manipulate it very easy.
Yeah. Yep.
Absolutely. I got to tell you something, Jody. I hate to cut this show. We're going on 2 hours. I've got a record. Jody, you set a record with me. For the most part, we had almost 200 people joined us today, Jody. Hats off to you, man.
Yeah, I saw a lot of questions in there, and people were saying hi, and I apologize I didn't have a chance to say hi. To answer your question. But if you have a question you want to ask, you can reach out to me on Facebook, or you can even go on the website, and we have a section there where we'll fight for an encounter, but you can always ask questions through there.
I will have all your links, Jody, too, in this show for everybody to check you out, because if you're interested in Dogman, I don't say this too often on shows, I recommend check out Jody's stuff, and Jody's pretty cool dude. He will respond to you via email, and so on and so forth. And he's very receptive and open to that. Yeah. A couple quick mentions before we call it a night.
Can I ask that question? I guess I missed it. I hate when I miss questions.
Yeah, go ahead.
Lolo says, I asked Jody earlier if he lives in the country or in the suburbs when he was talking about his dog acting strange.
I'm in a suburb.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Maggie. Arr. She's been a member. She's been a BMR pirate now for 7 months. It just tickles me that I've had people as members for like 7 months. I mean, I know I've been doing this for 3 years, but to know people that have followed me become a pirate for 7 months, that's really, I'm humbled by that, you guys. I love that. Thanks to all of you. It's really awesome, and thanks to T-Bone, thanks to Keith, thanks to Liberty, thanks to Mark, thanks to Flat Rock, thanks to Maggie for your super chats and donations. That goes recognized. I'm humbled by it, and I appreciate that. And I have to say this. I made 2 new moderators today. It was Jimmy, who is also known as Fisher of Spam, and Audacious Amber. Man, I made them moderators, and boy, they were right at it. Dropped links for Jody, for the girls, for Rob. You guys did a great job. And Catherine, of course, you did your great job.
Paranormal
Telling everybody to like Paranormal Paul did a great job. Yep. And as a moderator, I'm telling you, I'm not putting the pressure on you, but you kind of want to, you get the blue wrench for a reason. Support and subscribe and drop links for our guests first and foremost. And of course for us guys that you follow on a daily basis. I think you did a great job. And Jody Cook, it's always
quick announcement.
It's always Pancho Zorch. Thank you so much, buddy. Yes, Jody, go.
Yeah, in August, the North American Dogman Project is going to have we're starting our podcast.
Awesome.
So that's going to be really interesting. And I'm being part of I can't talk too much about it, being part of a project with someone who's very well known in the cryptid field, not a researcher, but through TV and cryptid shows and stuff. Very large project that's going to be happening at on fall. It's going to be about 2025 actually when it comes out, and it's going to be dealing with a lot of different cryptids and some very, very good information that's going to be put out. People are going to enjoy it. People are going to see a whole different aspect of views of the cryptid feels it's going to be more of a scientific view of different cryptids. And there's going to be a lot of PhDs that's going to be involved. And, it's going to be a very, very big project. And I'm a part of that, and I'm going to be a part of it all the way through. It's going to be neat. It's something that people are going to want to watch, and people are going to love it. And it's something that's been in the works for quite a few years, and it's finally going to happen, and it's going to be great.
I think it will be great. I think that anything that Jody Cook's involved with, I take it as quality. You're one of the few people, and I mean this, I respect you in this field. I do. You're a go-to guy for me. We don't talk all that much, but when we do, it's a lot of great information. I always appreciate you for coming back on. And everybody follow Jody Cook on his social media, especially being a dog man, because he's a straight shooter. And it's a little bit of what he's talking about, and I do appreciate Jody Cook once again.
There's also a bunch of North American Dogman Project Facebook groups too.
There's many. There's a plethora of them, and Jody started the group, and they're pretty much under your umbrella, Jody. So I'm sure you're proud of that. It's huge.
You can reach out to any of them to get in contact with me, and like I said, my Facebook page, my dog and me is my profile picture, so you'll be able to send me a message through there.
And again, thank you for everyone for coming on. If you're new here, subscribe to Bigfoot Mr. Rob on YouTube, the Blondes and the Booze Paranormal Podcast on YouTube. Follow Jody Cook. Subscribe to Donnie Cho Says Stuff. Donnie, I met for the first time in person in Alabama. Great guy. I saw Duke was hanging out. Subscribe to Duke if not already. Bart Nully and Humanoids. That's pretty much the people I roll with. And with that being said, we had a great show tonight. Tomorrow night, today's Tuesday. It's early. This Thursday, KRISTA, real briefly, what you got going on?
I'm not sure yet.
Well, we got back from vacation. Well, not really vacation. We worked our ass off at the conference. Of course, we had a lot of good times as well.
We did.
But we worked it. So, yeah, anyway, regardless, KRISTA, you're going to have a great show on Thursday at 9 o'clock in the East, the Blondes and the Booze. And with that being said, check us all out during the week. We're on almost every day. With that being said, thanks to Jody Cook, for KRISTA, I am BMR. And until next time, see you next time on the flip side. Bye-bye.
Thanks.